Diplomat's Archives, Hidden Stories. This is the 11th story. We begin today's story in front of the Roll of Honor located in the War Memorial of Korea. Here you can find the names of fallen soldiers from 22 UN member countries during the Korean War. Among the many names inscribed here, today we chose to focus on these four. Bruno Glazers, Jānis Krūmiņš, Rudolfs Liepa, and Ivar Saloniks. These are the names of Latvian soldiers who served under the US military during the Korean War and lost their lives in the conflict. Commemorating the 75th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War, we would like to shed light on the Latvian soldiers who fought in the war under the US military. To hear more about this story, our team visited the Latvian ambassador.
So how many Latvian veterans have been identified as having participated in the Korean War?
Unfortunately, we don't have a full picture. We have found 14 up to this time that we are sure about, but the full picture is still not available to us. Most that we know about served in the infantry of the US Army. Some were also with the Marine Corps, and at least one was with the parachute airborne regiment. So they did different kinds of roles, both combat roles, but also reconnaissance roles.
The Latvian soldiers who served in the Korean War first set foot on Korean soil in 1950, that was 75 years ago. However, it was only recently that information about them began to be properly collected and organized. But how much did Latvians know about these soldiers in the past?
We have always known to some aspect because the Latvian diaspora abroad, especially in the US, they had their own newsletters, their own newspaper, and in these newspapers there are articles that we can still find today telling these stories of these soldiers. What we hadn't done until now is we hadn't compiled it all into one. And this is something that we did finally last year, where our War Museum, after our request, combined all the information that they can find from all these different public sources of information into one, where we can now clearly identify 14. We hope that in the future we will find more.
As the ambassador just mentioned, research into the Latvian soldiers is being carried out through a collaboration between the Embassy of Latvia in Seoul and the Latvian War Museum. And our team had the opportunity to speak via video call with Kristaps Pildiņš, a historian and former researcher at the Latvian War Museum. Kristaps has written several articles on Latvian soldiers who served in the Korean War and has also worked with the Embassy of Latvia in Seoul on this very topic. But how did he become interested in the involvement of Latvian soldiers in the Korean War?
I have always been interested in the Cold War conflicts, but I knew relatively little about the Korean War. I knew that the Latvian War Museum had some materials from Latvian soldiers who fought in the Korean War, Then I started to identify these materials and realized that they were related to specific individuals.
The articles you see here are just some of the research published by Kristaps. They give an in-depth look at how Latvian soldiers ended up fighting in the Korean War under US command and the circumstances they faced at the time. At this point, another question comes to mind. How did Latvian soldiers end up serving under the US military in the Korean War? To understand the reason, we first need to take a look at Latvia's history.
For Latvian society as a whole, you have to know that we were under Soviet occupation in that time. And we were very much suffering from that Soviet occupation in that time.
Latvia's strategic location on the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea in northeastern Europe has long held geopolitical significance. Because of this, it has faced repeated invasions by foreign powers since the 13th century. From 1721, Latvia came under the rule of the Russian Empire. But in 1917, the Russian Revolution broke out, bringing an end to the Russian Empire. Just days after the end of World War I, on November 11, 1918, Latvia declared independence from Russia on November 18th and established the Republic of Latvia. But this period of independence was short-lived. In 1940, under the terms of a non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, Latvia was forcibly annexed by the Soviets. But just a year later, in 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union and occupied Latvia. At the time, the Nazi Germany used Latvia as a military outpost, conscripting Latvians for forced labor and carrying out mass killings of the Jewish population. Then, in 1944, Latvia was once again occupied by the Soviets and fell under their oppressive rule.
In 1941, a large portion of Latvian society was deported from Latvia to Siberia. Following that, in the years between 1948 and 1953, there was a second wave of deportations with a peak in 1949. Almost 3% of the population was removed from the country and told to never come back. At the same time, Soviet Russia infused the country with many Russian-speaking people from anywhere else in Russia, with the aim to abolish the Latvian language, Latvian culture, similarly as the Japanese did during their occupation in Korea.
Under Soviet control, many Latvians were persecuted and a large number fled the country. By the end of World War II, the number of Latvian refugees staying in Germany alone was estimated to be between 175,000 and 202,000. This graph displays the changing ethnic makeup of Latvia over time. From 1959 to 1989, the proportion of ethnic Latvians in the country's population steadily declined.
At the end of World War II, a large number of Latvians went into exile in Sweden and Germany. Displaced person camps were established in Germany, where Latvians stayed together. When the opportunity arose, most of them from Germany went to the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and Australia. This happened at the time when war broke out in Korea.
Many of the Latvians living in European refugee camps ended up immigrating to the United States in the early 1950s. And 1950 was a year of great significance for Korea as well. It was in that year, on June 25th, that the Korean War broke out. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War began with North Korea's sudden invasion of the South. The United States quickly called an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, which declared North Korea's actions an act of aggression that threatened global peace. In response, 16 nations, including the US, sent combat troops to support South Korea, while 6 others provided medical support.
The armed invasion of the Republic of Korea continues.
To learn more about these nations' involvement, we spoke with an expert.
안녕하세요. 저는 문관현 연합뉴스 기자입니다. 지금 연합뉴스에서 기자 생활을 30년을 하고 있는데요. 약 한 25년 정도를 외교 안보, 특히 우리 국방 관련된 분야에 대한 연구를 좀 많이 하고 있습니다.
He has covered foreign affairs, security, and defense for 25 years, earning a master's degree in 2008 from the Korean National Defense University for his research on the countries that participated in the Korean War.
1950년 6월 기준으로 유엔 회원국이 59개국이었습니다. 그런데 북한이 남침한 거에 대해서 무력 침공을 멈추고 38선 이북으로 병력을 후퇴시켜라고 결의한 82호에 대한 지지 성명을 낸 나라가 53개국입니다. 어마어마한 숫자입니다. 6.25는 단순히 한반도에 있어서 북한의 군이 남한의 영토를 침범한 이런 전쟁이 아니었고요. 당시에 이제 2차 대전 이후에 냉전 체제로 이행하는 과정에서 자유진영과 공산진영의 하나의 싸움의 어떤 도입부에 있던 상징적인 사건이었다고 다들 판단을 했습니다. 그렇기 때문에 유엔에서는 최초로 유엔군 사령부를 당시 창설을 했습니다. 유엔군 사령부는 인류 역사상, 유엔의 역사상 처음이자 마지막이 바로 한국전쟁 때 만들어졌던 겁니다. 당시에 이제 더 이상 어떤 지구의 인류 역사에 1차 대전, 2차 대전, 이 전쟁이라는 아픔이 없었으면 좋겠다는 어떤 희망에 대한 인류의 어떤 그 염원을 한국 전쟁에서 좀 발현을 하지 않았는가 이렇게 저는 생각을 하고 있습니다.
Under these circumstances, Latvians living in exile in the US joined the US military and came to Korea.
Individual World War II veterans, as well as young men who had reached the draft age, either voluntarily or by conscription, began serving in the United States Armed Forces, mainly in the Army or Marine Corps. The motivations of the soldier varied. Some saw opportunity to support themselves through military service, others to gain US citizenship, and others to prove their belonging to the country that had taken them in as refugees through their actions. Many of these soldiers, after completing basic training, ended up in units that were sent to Korea.
Some joined the military to gain US citizenship more quickly, some to fight communism, and others enlisted out of gratitude to the country that had taken them in. Many Latvians who fought in the Korean War under US command did so before becoming American citizens, so they participated in the war as Latvians, not Americans.
Some volunteered, some were drafted. The US had, in the 1950s or shortly before that, they changed their draft laws that said that they can also draft refugees, so non-citizens. And there was a choice that they could either go volunteer, and many did, or wait until they are drafted. One of the challenges, I guess you can call that, is that as they were not US citizens, they could not be officers, they could not take command. So they were relegated to combat roles, to soldier roles only, which limited their potential. But they did what they needed to do, they did their job, and fought, in my opinion, very bravely.
Today, the Latvian Embassy, the Latvian War Museum, and local historians are working to uncover more information about the Latvians who fought in the Korean War under U.S. command. But with so many years having passed since the armistice, the records have become difficult to find.
Unfortunately, the records of the U.S. Army, for the most part, are lost in a fire that happened in the 60s. And as far as I know, these records also don't contain distinguished information about the nationality of soldiers. So it's very difficult to find information in these archives. But my hope is that with enough work, we will get a much clearer picture.
So far, only 14 Latvian soldiers who fought in the Korean War have been identified. Their names are as follows. Kristaps, who once worked as a researcher at the Latvian War Museum, has written in-depth articles about some of these soldiers, based on preserved records in the museum and materials donated by their families. We asked him if there was a particular story about a Latvian soldier that he remembered the most.
Sometimes they say that the first one is always the most special one. And that's true for me too, because I see my share of injustice in my first story. The first one I wrote about was Private Aivars Kārlis Salnieks, who volunteered to join the U.S. Army in March 1952 at the age of 20. But by the summer was already in Korea in the ranks of the 279th Regiment of the 45th Division of the U.S. Army, which called themselves Thunderbirds.
Aivars Salnieks, born in 1931 in Latvia, fled to Germany with his family during the Soviet occupation. On November 16, 1950, the Salnieks family immigrated to the U.S. In 1952, at the age of 20, Aivars volunteered for the U.S. military. After completing basic training, he was deployed to Korea. In Haeanmyeon, Yanggu County, Gangwon-do Province, there is a basin village surrounded by mountains over 800 meters high. Because it resembles a punch bowl, U.S. troops nicknamed it the Punch Bowl. On October 18, 1952, Private Salnieks' unit was stationed in this area, which was at the front lines of the war. Shortly after midnight, North Korean forces launched a barrage of heavy artillery and mortar fire at their outpost. During the attack, Private Salnieks and 4 other soldiers became separated from the rest of their unit and took shelter in a bunker, where they fought desperately for their lives. At one point, an enemy grenade landed between Private Salnieks and 3 of the other soldiers. In that moment, Salnieks threw himself on top of the grenade, sacrificing his own life to save his comrades.
For his heroism, his company commander nominated Salnieks for the highest U.S. Army award, the Congressional Medal of Honor. In such cases, the award has always been awarded, but Salnieks was Latvian and not yet a U.S. citizen. These could have been the main arguments for not awarding the Congressional Medal of Honor, but the second highest award, the Distinguished Service Cross, while also correcting the description of the battle events. The case of Aivars Kārlis Salnieks is not the only one, as indicated by the fact that in 2014, US President Barack Obama awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor to 24 war veterans, 9 of whom were Korean War veterans. All had previously received the Distinguished Service Cross, and these soldiers were Latin Americans and Jews who were presented as soldiers who died fighting for a country that did not always consider these men as equal Americans. Could someone ever review the case of this young Latvian guy? I do not believe it, but even true, it was well deserved.
On another day, we visited the War Memorial of Korea in Seoul with the Latvian ambassador. Here, the names of those who died fighting in the Korean War are engraved.
So in Michigan, we have Aivars Salnieks. Over here, Aivars K. Salnieks.
Along with Private Aivars Salnieks, the names of 3 other Latvian soldiers are also inscribed here.
We have from the state of Wisconsin, we have Jānis who's listed here as one of the heroes that has fallen. We have from Illinois, Bruno Glazers, whose name can be found inscribed up here. And last but not least, from the state of New Jersey, Rudolfs Liepa. And he's inscribed at the very top in this column. So,
What would it feel like to find the names of your fellow countrymen on a Korean War memorial?
very humbling, because you see what my citizens did 70 years ago and how they fought as heroes, not under their own flag, but because they felt it's the right thing to do.
In addition to the 4 Latvian soldiers who died in the war, the Latvian Embassy and the Latvian War Museum have identified 10 more Latvian soldiers who fought in the Korean War. These 10 are believed to have safely returned home at the time. Our team tried to track down some of them for interviews, but by the time researched, all 10 veterans had already passed away. However, with the help of the embassy, we were able to get in touch with the family of one of them.
My name is Morris Karklins. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. My dad, Zigorts Karklins, was born in Latvia and immigrated to the United States in 1950 after World War II and joined the United States Army.
Mari's father, Zigorts Karklins, emigrated to the United States and later enlisted in the U.S. Army. He later served in Korea from March 1953 to January 1954 as part of the U.S. 25th Infantry Division, also known as Tropic Lightning. The 25th Division is known for its achievement in the Korean War, including its participation in the Hangang River crossing operation in March 1951 to recapture Seoul from the Chinese People's Volunteer Force. But why did he and his family leave Latvia and emigrate to the United States?
My grandfather was a captain in the Latvian cavalry, and as a 16-year-old, my dad didn't want to leave with my grandmother and his sister to go to Germany because he wanted to stay and fight the communists. So my grandfather was able to assist him in joining the Latvian Legion. And so as a 16-year-old, he fought in World War II. He was born in 1927. So This was 1943. He fought for like 3 years as a 16, 17, 18-year-old till they got to the Allied lines. And he then went to a displaced person camp, spent 3 years in a displaced person camp, and then immigrated into the United States. My grandmother, his mother, when they left in 1943 approximately, she thought they'd be back in 6 months. She cleaned the house, put her door key under the doormat, and left. They left most everything there because they thought they were coming back.
Shortly after fighting in World War II, Sigurds left his homeland of Latvia and later immigrated to the US, where he eventually served in the Korean War as a member of the US Army. What might he have thought about participating in the Korean War?
He wrote letters every single week when he was in Korea to his parents. And he exchanged letters with them every week for the entire year. So that's where I get a lot of the information from. And he wrote about it. And as I was reading it, I saw that even though he was away from home, he had a purpose for being in Korea. And he saw that there was a legitimate reason to be there, even though he wanted to come back to the United States because that was going to be his new home until Latvia was freed from the Soviets. But the common battle for him was, if you look at the article that he wrote that was in Stars and Stripes that I sent you, he writes that his goal was to fight communists. It didn't matter where they were. And that's the very first line of the article that I sent you.
At the time Sigurds left Latvia, the country was under Soviet control. Perhaps that's why he felt a deep sense of empathy for South Korea's situation at the time. When Sigurds was living in Latvia, could he have ever imagined that just a few years later he'd fight in a war in Korea, a country he had likely never even heard of?
I believe that it shows how small the world really is. How you have a small country like Latvia, you have Korea struggling with the communist infiltration, you got the United States involved. By seeing how a small country like Latvia can provide people that are willing to fight for a country like Korea, and there's Koreans that have gone to Latvia now, not for battle purposes, but to experience Latvian. The cultures, in some ways, our cultures intermingle. We're one small world with common purposes.
It was only in recent years that the existence of these soldiers became known in Korea and Latvia. Since then, the Latvian embassy has made great efforts to let their stories be known to more people. Last year, the Latvian embassy collaborated with the Latvian War Museum to hold an exhibition at the War Memorial of Korea titled Latvians in the Korean War. While visiting Korea at the time, the President of Latvia visited the War Memorial of Korea for the first time to attend the opening ceremony of the exhibition. In front of the memorial honoring the fallen, the President laid a wreath to pay tribute to the Latvian veterans and also participated in a tree planting ceremony in their memory. Together with the ambassador, we went to see the tree that was planted during that visit.
And we happened to have one of the first trees that has been planted for soldiers that did not fight under their own flag. And it is our hope that in the future, there will be many more recognized in this way or in a similar way. And this is the wonderful tree that my president was able to plant together with the chairman of the War Memorial.
The ambassador shared that the Latvian president's visit to the War Memorial helped strengthen the relationship between Korea and Latvia.
I believe it's changed the way we've looked at Korea from there on. We've had also, following the president, the chief of defense also visit Korea, and when offered the opportunity to pay tribute, he gladly did it. We find it important. And now I know that also the chief of defense is planning to go to Michigan and to visit the actual grave of the soldier as well and pay tribute there. So we are trying to pay our respects as wide as possible.
Research on Latvian veterans of the Korean War is still relatively recent, but collaboration between Korea and Latvia is already underway. Not long ago, Baek Seung-ju, the president of the Korea War Memorial Organization, which oversees operations and planning at the War Memorial of Korea, also visited Latvia.
라트비아뿐만 발틱 국가 또 동구라파 국가들도 대략적으로 한 2,500명 정도가 다른 나라 국적으로 참전을 했다 그래요. 그 분들의 뜻을 조금 기념할 수 있는 조형물이랄까 그런 시설을 전쟁 기념관에 설치하는 것을 지금 준비하고 있어요. 물자 지원국까지 포함해서 6.25 전쟁 때 우리를 도왔던 나라들을 더 온전하게 그분들의 마음을 이렇게 잘 이렇게 보존하고 후세 사람이 알도록 하는 그런 역할을 전쟁기념사업회가 하려는 준비를 하고 있어요. 참전을 선언하지 않았지만 참전했던 분 한 분 한 분을 기리는 그런 마음을 담아내려고 지금 준비하고 있습니다.
As of June 1950, neither the Republic of Korea nor the Republic of Latvia was a member of the United Nations. At the time, Latvia was under Soviet control, and for the Korean peninsula, although the U.S.-Soviet trusteeship had officially ended, its influence still lingered. Though they fought under the American flag at the time, the fact that Latvians joined the Korean War, shed blood, and fought in battle makes us living today reflect deeply 75 years after the outbreak of the war.
당시에는 그 유엔에 가입한 회원국이 59개, 59개 나라였습니다. 근데 지금의 유엔 가입국이 몇 개 나라냐면은 193개국이에요. 지금 2025년도 기준으로 봤을 때 나라들이 벌써 바뀐 나라가 많습니다. 이미 소련은 없어졌어요. 그리고 소련이 이제는 여러 나라로 15개의 나라로 지금 이미 나뉘었고 또 마찬가지죠. 프랑스군으로 참전했던 나라 중에 벌써 이제 모로코가 독립을 했고 튀니지 전부 다 알제리 다 독립을 했기 때문에 지금 나라를 얘기를 하자면은 당시의 버전으로 프랑스 나라라고 일률적으로 할 수가 없는 거예요. 그렇기 때문에 이 버전은 1950년대 버전이 아닌 지금 현재 2025년도 버전으로 재해석을 하고 의미를 다시 부여를 해야 된다고 봅니다. 역사를 정확하게 구체적으로 기술을 할 필요가 있는 거죠. 라트비아인도 참전했고 모로코인도 참전했고 알제리 사람도 참전을 했다. 그래야 정확한 저는 역사 해석이고 한국전쟁에 대한 이해라고 저는 보고 있습니다.
Korea and Latvia established diplomatic relations in 1991. This year marks the 34th anniversary of those ties. But through the stories of Latvian soldiers who fought in the Korean War, we've come to realize that the bond between the two countries dates back well before diplomatic relations were established.
There are challenges that we face all the time. And I believe we share some very important values, like we cherish freedom. Democracy is important for us. And we want to live in a world that's based on rule of law. It has been proven again and again that if we stand together, we can achieve more. If we come together, we can also make a better world. So I think it is important to highlight that we have always fought together for freedom and democracy. Also to exemplify why it is important to continue to do it today.
By shedding light on the hidden stories of Latvians who fought in the Korean War, we believe the relationship between the two nations can grow even stronger moving forward. All while never forgetting the spirit of solidarity shared 75 years ago for the freedom and democracy of this land.